On a distant planet, far beyond the reach of Earth's telescopes, there existed a realm ruled by a mighty and wise alien king named Zorath. His empire stretched across galaxies, and his name was known to both allies and enemies alike as a symbol of absolute power. However, despite his strength and vast influence, King Zorath harbored a deep secret, one that weighed heavily on his heart. His daughter, Princess Lyra, was not like the other warriors in their vast empire. While the inhabitants of their world were bred for strength, agility, and fierce combat, Lyra was different. She was frail, weak, and often mocked for her inability to master even the simplest of combat skills. Her frailty seemed to be a cruel joke for the heir to a throne built on might and conquest. Zorath, a king whose power came from dominance in battle, was deeply troubled by the thought that his own bloodline might falter. The princess had grown up with a sense of isolation. While other alien children trained in the martial arts of their people, Lyra's time was spent in the palace, hidden away from the rigorous expectations of her father's court. It wasn't that she lacked intelligence, she was sharp and insightful, a brilliant strategist, but her body was fragile. Her lack of physical prowess became a source of shame, and Zorath could see it in her eyes every time she looked at the warriors who surrounded her. Lyra's greatest fear was disappointing her father, whose legacy was built on the strength of his armies and the fear he instilled in his enemies. Yet no matter how hard she tried, her body betrayed her, and the warriors continued to train and grow stronger while she remained in the shadows. One fateful day, however, as the skies of the kingdom darkened with the shadow of an approaching war, King Zorath realized that his daughter's weakness might not be the end of their lineage after all. A threat emerged from beyond the stars, a threat that none of Zorath's forces could confront. It was a human, a young soldier from Earth, whose power was something no one could understand. Humans, despite their seemingly weak nature compared to his people, were capable of remarkable feats, both of strength and of willpower. The king had heard whispers of this human warrior's abilities, and he knew that this individual might hold the key to transforming his daughter into something far greater. Zorath, desperate to ensure his empire's survival, decided to send for the human, a being from a far-off world, to meet his daughter. The human, a young man named Kael, was summoned across the stars to the alien kingdom, unaware of the grand fate that awaited him. When Kael arrived, he found himself in a world that defied everything he had ever known. The inhabitants were tall and imposing, their eyes glowing with a fierce light that sent shivers down his spine. The planet itself was alive with energy, and its majestic landscapes were dotted with alien creatures and technology that seemed straight out of a science fiction novel. But Kael's attention was fixed on one thing, the princess. Princess Lyra was nothing like he expected. She stood at the heart of the palace, her long silver hair cascading over her shoulders, her violet eyes filled with an intensity that belied her fragile appearance. She looked at him with a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. It was clear that she had been sent for a purpose, but the nature of that purpose was yet unknown to her. King Zorath had already laid out his plan. Kael, the human soldier, was to train Lyra in the ways of combat. He believed that the strength of a human's will, combined with their innate adaptability, could be the catalyst for Lyra's transformation. But there was a catch. Kael had no idea what awaited him either. He had been told little about the princess's true nature, and he was soon to learn that the challenge before him would push him to his limits. At first, Lyra was hesitant. She had grown accustomed to being told that she was weak, and the thought of someone, especially a human, trying to teach her how to fight felt like another cruel joke. Yet Kael's presence had an air of determination about him. There was something about his eyes, his unwavering gaze, that told her he would not give up on her. He saw something in her that no one else had ever seen. And so, with little more than a flicker of hope in her heart, Lyra agreed to the training. What followed was the beginning of a transformation unlike any other. Kael, although inexperienced in dealing with alien physiology, found himself uniquely able to connect with Lyra. Despite her delicate form, there was a strength within her that she had never fully realized. Every day, Kael pushed her, testing her in ways she never thought possible. He made her confront her fears, both physical and emotional, and slowly, Lyra began to shed the layers of weakness that had once defined her. Through a blend of discipline, strength, and the relentless human drive to overcome, Lyra began to change. Her body, once fragile, grew stronger. Her mind, once clouded with self-doubt, became sharper. And in the depths of her transformation, she discovered something truly extraordinary, a fierce warrior's spirit that had been dormant within her all along. But the path ahead was not easy. As Lyra's training intensified, so too did the threats that loomed on the horizon. The war that had been brewing for years was finally reaching a boiling point, and the fate of her kingdom, and the universe itself, hung in the balance. Lyra would soon have to face an enemy unlike any she had ever encountered, and it would take all of her newfound strength, and the lessons Kael had taught her, to confront the darkness that threatened to consume everything she held dear. The alien princess, once a symbol of weakness and vulnerability, was now on the verge of becoming a legendary warrior, a force to be reckoned with. And as her father, King Zorath, looked on from his throne, he realized that his daughter was no longer just a princess. She was the future of their empire, a warrior in her own right. And the human soldier, Kael, had played a crucial role in unlocking her potential. But their journey was far from over. The true test of Lyra's strength would come in the form of an invasion led by a ruthless conqueror, a being whose power threatened not just their kingdom, but the entire galaxy. This final battle would be the ultimate challenge, one that would determine if Lyra had truly become the fearsome warrior her people needed. The stage was set for an epic clash, and the once weak daughter of King Zorath was ready to prove that even the most unlikely of heroes could rise to greatness. As the days passed, Lyra's body grew stronger, more defined with each grueling session. Kael was relentless in his training, pushing her past her limits, showing her techniques from Earth that no one on her planet had ever seen. These techniques were not based solely on raw strength or advanced technology, but on the will to keep fighting when all seemed lost. They were rooted in humanity's endless determination, their ability to rise above insurmountable odds. At first, Lyra struggled. Her body ached with exhaustion, and doubt crept into her mind. Was she truly capable of becoming the warrior she so desperately needed to be? Kael saw the struggle in her eyes, and in those moments, he would remind her of the first lesson he had ever taught her: the warrior spirit was born not from what one was, but from what one could become. "You are not what you were yesterday, Lyra," Kael would say. "Every battle is a step toward who you are meant to be." Each day, she fought harder. It wasn't just the physical training that transformed her, it was the internal shift. The realization that she had been living in the shadow of her weakness, letting it define her, was the hardest thing she ever had to face. But when she started pushing back against it, embracing the fight, she felt a surge of energy, an awakening. Slowly, the once fragile princess was replaced by a woman of strength, determination, and fierce willpower. Her movements became fluid, her combat instincts sharp. She was no longer a symbol of her father's disappointment, but the embodiment of his legacy, a force capable of standing by his side in battle. Yet even as Lyra grew stronger, the danger outside the palace walls grew more imminent. Reports of enemy forces, an ancient and powerful race known as the Kthon, began to surface. Their leader, a conqueror named Kharaz, was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. A tyrant with an insatiable thirst for power, Kharaz had been preparing for years, and now, his forces were marching toward Zorath's kingdom. Kharaz was a terrifying figure, his race was known for its superior strength and ruthless nature, and he had conquered countless worlds in his rise to power. The war between the Kthon and Zorath's empire had been inevitable, but no one had anticipated that it would come so soon. Kuraz's forces were massive, and his tactics brutal. The peaceful days that had once defined Lyra's life were gone, replaced by the grim reality of war. King Zorath had spent years preparing for this moment, building an immense army and powerful weapons, but even his resources felt inadequate in the face of Kuraz's oncoming assault. It was clear to Zorath that they would need something more than mere numbers to stand a chance. He looked to Lyra, his eyes filled with pride, but also a deep sense of urgency. "My daughter," Zorath said, his voice unusually soft, "you have become everything I hoped you could be, and more. The time has come for you to lead. You must face Kharaz, not as a princess, but as a warrior, because only a warrior can defeat him now." Lyra stood in front of her father, her gaze unwavering. She had spent her entire life wondering if she could ever be worthy of his legacy, but now, standing on the precipice of battle, she knew the answer. She was ready. "I won't fail you, father," Lyra vowed, her voice calm yet filled with the raw power of someone who had discovered their true potential. With Kael at her side, Lyra led the charge against the Kthon forces. The battlefield was nothing like she had ever imagined. It was chaos, a swirling mess of combat, technology, and death. But Lyra had learned to embrace that chaos. With every swing of her weapon, she felt more alive. She was no longer the frightened, uncertain princess, she was a warrior, a leader of her people. The Kthon were formidable opponents, their strength unmatched by most in the galaxy. But Lyra had something they did not, the human spirit, the drive to never give up. She fought with everything she had, her every strike a testament to her growth, her will, and the training Kael had given her. Kael was there every step of the way, fighting beside her with the same intensity. He had seen her change, had witnessed her transformation from a frail princess into a warrior capable of taking down entire squads of enemies. His respect for her had grown with each passing day. They were no longer just teacher and student, they were allies, comrades in arms, bound by a shared purpose. As the battle raged on, Lyra's forces began to gain the upper hand, but Kharaz had not yet shown himself. The true test was yet to come. Kuraz's appearance on the battlefield was nothing short of terrifying. He was massive, standing nearly 10 feet tall, his body encased in dark, indestructible armor. His eyes glowed with an eerie red light and his voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of centuries of conquest. "You think you can defeat me?" Kharaz sneered, his voice echoing across the battlefield. "I have crushed entire civilizations. Your empire will fall, and your people will bow before me." Lyra stood firm, her weapon gripped tightly in her hands. She had faced countless enemies in her training, but Kharaz was different. He was the embodiment of everything she had feared, strength without compassion, power without purpose. Yet, she was no longer afraid. "I will not bow," she said, her voice filled with defiance. "Not to you, and not to anyone." The final clash between Lyra and Kharaz was nothing short of epic. Their fight shook the very earth beneath them. Kharaz's blows were devastating, each strike capable of crushing entire battalions, but Lyra was faster, more agile. She dodged and weaved, using her new strength to counterattack at the perfect moments. The battle was not just physical, it was mental, a clash of ideologies. Kharaz's vision of domination and control was opposed by Lyra's belief in freedom, in the will to fight for what was right. In the end, it was her human spirit, her unwillingness to give in, that gave her the strength to land the final blow. She struck Kharaz's chest with a powerful, well-aimed strike, piercing through his armor and driving deep into his heart. Kharaz let out a final, guttural scream before collapsing to the ground, his reign of terror brought to an end. The battle was won. The Kthon forces, leaderless and in disarray, quickly retreated. Zorath's empire had been saved, and Lyra had proven herself not only to her father but to herself. She had transformed from a weak, uncertain princess into a fearsome warrior, a symbol of hope and strength for her people. King Zorath, watching his daughter stand tall over the fallen enemy, felt a sense of pride unlike any he had ever known. He had always hoped for a successor worthy of his throne, but never had he imagined that it would be Lyra, his daughter, the one he had once feared was too fragile to rule. "You have surpassed me, Lyra," Zorath said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are the future of this empire, and the galaxy is now yours to protect." Lyra smiled, her eyes fierce and determined. "The future is not just mine, father," she said. "It belongs to all of us." With Kael by her side, Lyra ruled with wisdom and strength, a beacon of hope in a galaxy that had once been ruled by fear. And though her journey had only just begun, she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she was ready. She had proven that even the weakest of beings could rise to greatness. And in the end, it wasn't strength alone that defined her, it was her will to never give up.